Welcome everyone to the ULT San Diego Aquarian Series. And today we will be hearing a presentation on karma and transmutation. Very vital topic for everyone alive, especially in these amazing times. We will just, let me tell you about a few upcoming events. Our normal summer season is kind of in remission right now, and we'll get that going. Our normal season of the Secret Doctrine Study class and our other classes starting mid-September. So for now, we just have the Aquarian series, and pretty soon we'll be opening the bookstore. So that'll be a big deal. We'll make a big deal out of that when the time comes. So I'm just going to open up the Aquarian Almanac because right now I'm a little bit technologically challenged. And I'm going to open up and just mention a few of the upcoming talks that we have coming up. So next week, we'll hear a presentation on yoga and will. The week after that, we'll hear a presentation on desirelessness. So that would be on the 30th of this month. And then a week after that, a presentation on transcendence and immanence. That's on September 6th. And on the 13th, we'll be hearing a presentation on moderation and excess. Seems to be kind of a Buddhist vibe, I would think. Then we'll be hearing a presentation on the mysterious symbol of the unicorn. That's on the 20th. And then after that, on the 27th of September is Noetic Discipline. So all these topics, they weave into each other, and one seems to kind of foreshadow the next one, and which in turn gives clues and hints about the next one, etc. And before we start our presentation today, which will be given by Dr. Judy Salzman, and also the chairperson today will be Desiree Van Sanen. And before our presentation gets started, we will hear a reading from the Voice of the Silence.
Reading from the Voice of the Silence, page 13. Strive with thy thoughts unclean before they overpower thee. Use them as they will thee, for if thou sparest them and they take root and grow, know well these thoughts will overpower and kill thee. Beware, disciple, suffer not, e'en though it be their shadow to approach, for it will grow, increase in size and power, and then this thing of darkness will absorb thy being before thou hast well realized the black fell monster's presence. Before the mystic power, Kundalini, the serpent power, can make of thee a god Lanu, thou must have gained the faculty to slay thy lunar form at will. The self of matter and the self of spirit can never meet. One of the twain must disappear. There is no place for both. Ere thy soul's mind can understand, the bud of personality must be crushed out, the worm of sense destroyed past resurrection. Thou canst not travel on the path before thou hast become the path itself. Let thy soul lend its ear to every cry of pain, like as the lotus bears its heart to drink the morning sun. Let not the fierce sun dry one tear of pain before thyself hast wiped it from the sufferer's eye. But let each burning human tear drop on thy heart and there remain, nor ever brush it off until the pain that caused it is removed. These tears, O thou of heart most merciful, these are the streams that irrigate the fields of charity immortal. 'Tis on such soil that grows the midnight blossom of Buddha, more difficult to find, more rare to view than is the flower of the Voge tree. It is the seed of freedom from rebirth. It isolates the Arhat both from strife and lust. It leads him through the fields of being into the peace and bliss known only in the land of silence and non-being. Kill out desire, but if thou killest it, take heed lest from the dead it should rise again. Kill love of life, But if thou slayest Tanha, who will to live, let this not be for thirst of life eternal, but to replace the fleeting by the everlasting. Desire nothing, chafe not at karma, nor at nature's changeless laws, but struggle only with the personal, the transitory, the evanescent, and the perishable. Help nature and work on with her, and nature will regard thee as one of her creators and make obeisance.
Okay, Judy, it's all yours.
Okay. All right. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going back to the beginning of the presentation. All right, karma and transmutation. Of course, there are many different words for this process we go through in life. And as the reading says, it's very difficult to go through the process of enduring one's karma and transmuting oneself to a higher nature on the path. And there's the old saying is you can't change human nature, but that's exactly what Theosophy proposes to do and can do if you're willing to do it yourself. All right, so let's talk about karma. This is a Sanskrit word, of course, which has made its way into English as early as a 1960 dictionary. I remember seeing the word karma, and of course, English borrows from foreign words more than any other language. It's a hybrid language. But we could say basically karma means physically action, metaphysically the law of retribution, an impersonal law of retribution, the law of cause and effect or ethical causation. Karma neither punishes nor rewards, but it's simply the one universal law. Karma is that moral kernel of our being which alone survives death. It continues in transmigration or reincarnation, transmutation. The causes produced by it cannot be eliminated from the entire universe unless replaced by their legitimate effects. So, of course, this is a reference to the Sheila virtue in the voice of the silence, the harmony of word and act, the key that balances the cause and the effects and leaves no further room for karmic action. And of course, that is very difficult to do. But of course, that is one of the requirements for the development of the spiritual body on the path. Now, let's look at some of Judge's aphorisms on karma. He says there is no karma unless there is a being to make or feel its effects. So when you read the first sentence in the Secret Doctrine, the eternal parent once more wrapped in her ever invisible robes had slumbered once again for 7 eternities. And then it says the causes of existence had been done away with. Well, there isn't anything more for karma in the universe. But of course, the universe had to start again under the law of karma. So karma is an undeviated and unerring tendency in the universe to restore equilibrium, and it operates incessantly. Karma is not subject to time, and therefore he who knows what is the ultimate division of time in this universe knows karma. I frankly admit I do not fully understand that one. Can we go back in time and correct our mistakes? That would be nice, but I don't know if that's true or not. The karma of the earth is a combination of all beings of every grade which were concerned in the previous Manvantara. And this is, of course, a period of the circling of consciousness through the 7 globes on the planet. Judge on karma continued. In life of worlds, races, nations, and individuals, karma cannot act unless there is an appropriate instrument provided for its action. Changes may occur in the instrument during one life as to make it appropriate for an entirely new class of karma. And this may take place in 2 ways. A, through the intensity of thought and power of a vow, and B, through actual alterations due to the complete exhaustion of all causes. For example, in the Bible, there are quite a few references to Jesus healing, and it's almost as if he is telling the person, like the person who was born blind, that the reason that he was born blind has been ended because he has lived through the retribution for it. Or in the case of other healings, that when he heals the suffering servant of the centurion, that because of the centurion's faith, in spite of the fact that he's a Roman, and of course the Jews and the Romans are at odds with each other, his servant, the boy who carries his shield, will be healed because it is an exhaustion of karma. This is theosophical interpretation of that. Okay. Now, of course, there are different expressions for the karmic change for the soul from one transmutation to move to a different form as an alchemist transmutes elements. Now, of course, chemistry is the most occult of all sciences. And of course, what the chemist is constantly doing is transmuting elements. A cook in the kitchen is transmuting elements, mixing various properties of food together, hopefully to make good food. Now, also, the term reincarnation is most commonly used in the West, really, to take on a new body to reincarnate. However, I know my professor, when I was at UC Santa Barbara, who was an expert in Sanskrit, insisted that the Buddhists really meant rebirth, to be reborn in a different body, because of course the Buddhists did not really approve of the Hindu expression of Atman, because too many Hindus were using it to refer to a personal self, which it is not. It is really the higher self. And of course, the Buddhists think of Anatman, which essentially means that there is no real personal self. It's temporary. Now, metamorphosis is another term used, especially by the philosopher Leibniz, who is 17th century philosopher who wrote a great work called the Monadologie in French, although he was a German of Slavic descent, a very brilliant man. And although a Christian, he believes strongly in metamorphosis of the soul, and he also believes strongly that every soul was a divine monad, which is a being that does not have extension or mass on this plane, but nevertheless is our higher self. He makes a very good argument, very much neglected philosopher in contemporary philosophy and graduate schools. Now, there's also the term resurrection used by the Christians, the Muslims, and by some Jewish people. The idea of the rebirth of the body at the time of the second coming. And quite often, Christians think of this as the personality. And St. Paul, however, makes it clear that in 1 Corinthians 15, that of soma, body, psyche, mind, and pneuma, soul, it is the pneuma which resurrects or is raised in glory. In other words, it isn't the resurrection of the physical body that Paul is talking about. He's talking about the resurrection of the higher self, and he was an initiate, according to H.P. Blavatsky. He's not quite as he's depicted in exoteric Christianity, but more of a Gnostic. And there are some academics, such as Elaine Pagels, who have argued that he really was a Gnostic, and she makes a very good case for it. Now, let's go to H.P. Blavatsky on transmutation. On a flesh periodically by the soul or the ego was a universal belief, nor can anything be more consonant with justice and karmic law. She says this in the Theosophical Glossary. Verily, an evil follows a man passing through 100,000 transmigrations. Panchatantra, which has to do with different transmigrations, that word. And there's a work about the Buddha's previous lives before he became Siddhartha Gautama called the Panchatantra. Now, but here she's quoting a man named Bodwick in the glossary. And she also says it has passed through the animals of the earth and the sea and all the birds, and it will re enter the body of a newborn man. This is pre existence. Now, it's very important to note that Theosophists do not think that the soul is made from the mind of a god at some particular time X when each of us are born. The soul has always existed in some form, even in a mineral form, a mineral monad, which is not mentioned in this passage, but in previous manvantaras or previous rounds, we passed through all of it. And we're going to pass through further forms. Now, let's go forward and not backward here. That's the way nature goes. All right. Okay, so the question is what transmutes or what reincarnates? I've been asked that in a very, very sharp way by philosophy professors and people who are skeptical. Well, this goes to the sevenfold nature of the human being, which on the lowest level is the shola sharira, the physical temporary body, and it's but a composite, as Plato says. It's only going to last a short time, even though we try to take care of it as best we can. It's not designed to live much longer than 100 years for people in the best of health. Then, of course, there is the astral or linga sharira, which is our design body, which is really very close to us and which really must be purified in order for any kind of progress to take place, and its bad propensities must be destroyed. Now, of course, there's the prana, the breath, which is, of course, a microcosm of the wind, the breath of the earth. And we know that when a person dies, that there's no longer any breath, that the heart stops functioning, the brain goes flatline, and the organs stop functioning. But of course, there's the lower manas, and thinking, excuse the error and spelling there, spoiled by personal desires, which really is also temporary because it can be purified. But of course, the higher manas, the buddhi, the intellective and spiritual soul, this is the monad that really is the person we are, but we don't really know unless we are a profound meditator. Now, the Atma, the universal oversoul to which we are all connected, is eternal, and it does not in any way reincarnate in the sense that the Buddha and manas do. It's just always there and really can't be polluted. One of the best introductions for Westerners ever since the Oversoul, which was strongly influenced by the Upanishads. Now, of course, okay, the next slide. We have to think that what transmutes goes through metempsychosis. This is a term used by Plato, and these higher principles, the divine monad, the buddhi manas, goes from one body to another. It's really a very simple matter. It's just a matter of like changing clothes or moving to another place. And of course, many people who don't think in this way are very much afraid of death, either because they're afraid of going to hell for their misdeeds, or they're afraid of just nothingness because they're materialists. And of course, this is not a reality according to theosophy. These are both misconceptions about the nature of life. Now, of course, the Atma remains unmoved, as was said. The manas, sullied by being embodied and soiled by selfish desires, carries skandhas with it, propelling it into a new incarnation. Well, there's really only one manas, but the ordinary person gets very sunk into the lower manas, into personal desires. There's nothing wrong with having desires, but desire for the personal self, for self-aggrandizement, for money, power, and pleasure can be very destructive, and this can be very corrupting. Now, most of us fall into this. A few people who are saintly manage to avoid it, but they're very few. And according to Plato, when the soul is ready to reincarnate or transmute, the soul makes a decision in accordance with what it knows and what it can accomplish in the next life. In other words, we choose our own parents and we have a brief vision of a life to come before we, in a sense, go into that particular womb of our mother. But it's also noted that there can't be a conception without a divine monad present. And of course, the energy needed for conception comes from Fohad, which permeates the universe. and it causes the implanted seed to grow. It causes everything to grow. And transmutation will occur according to the laws of karma earned by previous lives of the individual. As the Light of Asia says, each man's life, a product of his former living, is. We are karma, and we create our own destiny. And just one further word about Fohat, because I think it is important. Because without Fohat, without this dynamic energy of cosmic ideation, or regarded from the other side as the intelligent medium, the guiding power of all manifestation, thought divine, transmuted, and made manifest through the Dayan Choans, the architects of the visible world. Thus, from spirit or cosmic ideation comes our consciousness, cosmic substance, the several vehicles in which the consciousness is individualized and attains the self or reflective consciousness, while Fohat, in its various manifestations, is a mysterious link between mind and matter, the animating principle electrifying every atom of life. And so, just one more thing. It's the action of Fohat upon a that produces life. So when there is a zygote implanted in a womb, the energy that makes it grow really ultimately goes all the way back to Fohat. And of course, again, this has to come from the divine ego being present. So ultimately, we're all cosmic. I'll just end on that note. We all have the possibility of rising to the highest knowledge of the Dayan Choans, or the possibility of falling into a pit is very much our choice, and we make our own karma. We are karma. It is not determinism other than as we're self-determined. So thank you all very much for listening to this. Okay. That's the end of it. We'll just go back to talking with each other, I hope.
Thank you. You can just click on stop share.
Stop share, yeah.
Yeah, just click on stop share, and then we'll have access to everyone's.
There we go.
Here.
Yeah, see everybody again. Okay.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much, Judy. That was remarkable, and we apologize for any of the technical difficulties. And we always get over them, and that's the important thing. Wonderful discussion. I am thrilled to talk a little bit about this karma, and I know we've heard this phrase that there is no karma unless there is a being to make it or feel its effects. Yet, sometimes I come across these phrases and it bothers me just a little bit, because I know that karma is pervasive and ongoing, just like motion is. There's no end to it. It's simply our perception of what it is that may change, or the degree in which it's operating based upon the subject that it's operating through or with. Is there a point that we can just simply say that karma is always in effect, but sometimes it's operating as dharma?
Well, I would say that if one is following the path, if one has found the path and is trying to become that path itself, as the reading says, then it has become dharma. It's the law. We're more and more in control of our own karma. The problem people have is that karmic actions happen to them. We have accidents, we make mistakes in choices, job choices, we marry the wrong person, we make all kinds of mistakes. Our political leaders make terrible mistakes because they're after power or they're not aware of the effects that their choices are going to make. But I think karma becomes dharma when one has really chosen a path, and it doesn't even have to be consciously theosophy. I mean, I recently heard Father Gregory Boyle speak at UC Santa Barbara, and he has given his life to helping the very poor in East LA, many of whom have been in jail or gangbangers, people on drugs, people that everyone said were just trash, quote, and no one can help. Well, some of these people have now reformed. They have become students at UC Santa Barbara. They have done very well in life. They become good family people. And there are others that have been failures. Father Boyle said he's done so many funerals of young people that he can't do them anymore. But I mean, this man has the aura of a saint. And he's not a theosophist, he's a Catholic. But he is working absolutely for the good of others. So he's truly on the path. He's perhaps what you call a blind Shela. He's really doing the work of the masters by helping those that everyone else thought were incorrigible. He's really helped. And I know someone who knew him personally in seminary, and he could have had an easy job at the University of Santa Clara, but he chose to go to the poorest parish in the country. So he's a very remarkable person just to be in his presence. You can see something about him that is very unusual. He's chosen a dharma.
Mhm.
So anyway, there must be other questions about this.
Laura?
Yes, thank you, Judy, and thank you for bringing the transmutation into an understanding of karma. You know, that we all have the karmic limitations of our past, and your talk brings to mind our responsibility to remake those conditions from our past, to transform them, to transmute them. And the example you gave is very important. And another application of that was in the film with the nun, Dead Man Walking, where she said that we as a humanity have an obligation to help people back to their humanness when they have a transgression, and that comes out in the idea that we are our brother's keeper as well, that there's a karmic connection there. So, but thank you for bringing this idea that whatever limitations we're experiencing right now are limitations that we ourselves have created, and we can overcome them.
Yes, that's a very good comment on this whole issue. In Dead Men Walking, I felt very sympathetic for the poor man who was going to be executed and the nun who cared about him so much, because it really doesn't do any good to kill people. We know that we're just going to throw a soul into the astral until the end of that life has dissipated. So theosophists are very much against the death penalty for that reason. And it really doesn't help the society. People may think it will, but it's not going to help. So, fortunately, California has a moratorium on the death penalty now, but not the United States as a whole.
Mm. Yeah, that the whole death penalty thing it's so ridiculous. When you think about the also when you think about the energy that's put toward it, the anger, the misuse of power, And most of all, to show how bad murder is by murdering people. It's just the hypocrisy is out the window. I mean, it's just crazy. But that's just one person's opinion on the death penalty.
Yes,
Well,
well,
proven that it's not a deterrent.
No, it's not.
no, it is not a deterrent, and it's not a good karma for the state of California or for the United States to keep the death penalty in many civilized countries in Europe, Scandinavia, England, Germany no longer have the death penalty because there's no way to kill a person that really doesn't involve some cruelty. And as some people really do reform. I know Henry Geiger, who was remarkable theosophist in Los Angeles years ago, very wise man. He helped me a great deal to find the path. And he had been corresponding with a man named Carol Chessman, who was a Lover's Lane murderer. I mean, the man he did some terrible things. And he received the death penalty, but he was in prison for many years with appeals. And then finally, Henry wrote to him because he wrote to Henry. He had been reading Manas, and Henry asked him to write some articles, and he said they were beautiful articles. He said the man had totally changed, and whoever the man was as a murderer was no longer there anymore. So Henry, I think, appealed to the governor. His lawyers appealed to the governor. There was a whole big protest, and I remember that day at San Jose State University. My professor refused to teach. He said, if the state of California does this, I don't want to teach for them today. But at any rate, they executed Carol Chessman. And, I think by the gas chamber, which is very cruel. I mean, they crack open these poison gas eggs, and the person is strapped down and has to sit there and eventually breathe in this poison and, die therefrom. And I've seen movie depictions of it. It's very, very cruel. At any rate, there must be other questions.
David.
Yeah, in relation to that, Judy, there seems to be this growth in the idea that assisted suicide in certain states, laws are being passed to be able to do that it's actually humanitarian to people that are they think aren't going to make it or are in a lot of pain. I wonder how theosophy just looks at that concept.
Well, I recently tried to talk someone out of doing that very subtly and kindly. She did it anyway, and she was very close to death. But the problem is, if you destroy the body, we know that the person is not really destroyed. The person is just going to be floating in the astral out of control and not really getting rid of the pain they felt when they executed their body. But eventually, that life will dissipate and that pain will be gone, and that person will be going to Devahan and eventually to a new incarnation. But I did talk to the former governor of Oregon about this years ago at a conference, and her husband had the medication for it. He didn't take it, but she said it was a comfort to him just to have it, knowing that he could die when he wanted to. But I would be personally against it. As I said, I tried to talk this friend out of it, or very subtly. I don't think she would have lived very long anyway. But there must be other views about this.
Yeah,
Jonathan? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead there, David. Hello,
Yeah.
David?
Oh, sorry. I was wondering if this might have some sort of a group fallout, by just promoting this. Somebody might have a good motive to help somebody, but if we read HPB's article, "Is Suicide a Crime?" It seems that there's other karmic effects going on in kind of the way we look at life, you might say.
Yes. Well, it's quite different if the person who, for example, falls on a grenade to save his buddies,
Right.
not committing suicide for the motive,
Right.
I just can't stand life or the pain anymore. And it said that the Lapika will protect such people from a bad after death state, but the person who destroys their body because they can't take it anymore, there's a saying. I remember Nandini Iyer repeating in the lodge that no man's suffering is greater than he can bear, or he would die.
Huh.
So I think whatever suffering we have, we can bear it. I mean, in some sense, we're the cause of it, and we
Right.
could be the end of it. And of course, now they have wonderful medical ways of getting rid of pain, morphine. And I understand in England they'll even give you opium or heroin, but I don't know whether I approve of that or not. But at any rate, suicide is not a good thing. But someone who commits suicide unselfishly, it's rather different than one who does it because they just can't handle life.
So were you suggesting there, Judy, that hastening one's death in the modern medical way theosophically would lengthen one's Kamaloka period?
Yes, it would put them in a Kamaloka period where they're out of control. I mean, it seems that what the path wants to do with karma, as I understand Blavatsky and Judge on this, is that we take more and more control of our own karma and more control of our life than in our next life. When one gets older, and of course, I'm now older, and I often think of like, who am I going to be in the next life? Well, that's not the right thought. The thought should be, who am I really? Who are each of us really as a divine monad? And then what are we doing in these bodies? Well, we have to have them as much as they might give us some problems sometimes. But who are we really going through this particular cycle? It is a cycle. I mean, every second someone is being born and someone is dying. So we can think that we're part of this great cycle. And we,
That was Ken Small, by the way, and now it really is Jonathan, like it says in the thing. So that was Ken that asked you that question just now. Desiree, I had a question that I wanted to ask, but I wanted to kind of shift gears. Should we ask if Laura is along the same lines here, or shifting gears also?
In a different direction.
Okay. I have a karma question. Okay, all right. Well, now we have a karma question. Come on up here. His name is Chris. So Chris is he's going to be in front of the thing in a minute.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Chris.
It's good to see everyone. Be here. It's been a while. So my question is about like karma from like a group perspective or a community perspective or larger, like even a country perspective or something like that. So like when you take a step back, we talk a lot about like personal karma, but what about karma from like groups of people or communities and things like that? I'd like to kind of bring that up as a topic and see if anybody has any thoughts or input around that. That'd be great. Thanks.
yes, that's a very good question, Chris. I probably should have emphasized it more in my remarks because we all have a personal karma, a family karma, karma regarding a group we might belong to, such as spiritual religious group. Then there's a national karma. There's the karma of the whole human race. And of course, sometimes people get involved in a karma such as a hurricane or a war who are quite innocent, but later on there'll be a balance for the effect that occurred. And their family karma is very interesting. I find it quite interesting that near the end of her life, my mother broke her hip and had an auto accident. Well, this has happened to me as well. I broke my hip in the kitchen, and I also had an auto accident, which has changed my life. But at any rate, we all have to go through our karma and not chafe at it. Not say, oh, poor me, I just suffered so unjustly and try to blame it on God or our parents or person we don't like at work, or we have made it ourselves, and we can make a better karma for ourselves, a dharma, as Desiree said. There must be further comments on this.
Can I go ahead, Desiree? It's interesting, that question that came up, because in thinking about karma, and you mentioned about the higher self and the Atma as not being separate, there's a unity there. And so in some parts of the literature, it mentions that karma is Atma. Karma is the higher self, that there is that aspect of karma that the last question asked that is universal and that we're working together on. And in looking at some of the imagery now from the quantum physics that we see and the impact of our thinking on these elementals and on the skandhas and on this quantum physics, that it seems that we are all impressing that field. And so we have a collective karma for whatever it is that we're putting in that field. And so maybe we can look at it as well, not just personally, but taking a responsibility for what we put into the field, so to speak.
Absolutely, yeah. To this student's understanding, of course, Atma is ultimately the highest that we can conceive of, such as Atma Brahman. And we can't really know any God other than our higher self. And of course, Atma is also correlated with the Christos. Many people correlate Christos with Buddhi, but it's really Atma, according to HBB. And that doesn't get so messed up. But the problem is, though, that when the lower manas get involved in personal desires, that's what soils us, and that's what we have to purify. And it may not be a pleasant process. But it's also said that good karma is pleasing to the Ishvara within, meaning that, of course, the higher self, and that someone may have an accident and be very peeved about this, but ultimately it might lead to things that are very helpful to the soul being that really is. And so a person has to understand themselves as a soul being before they're ready to really accept their karma and work and go on with it. They make it a dharma. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't do that. They just want to blame it on fate or some god they're mad at or some person, or unfortunately, that seems to be the case.
Jonathan?
Yeah, a couple things. One in reference to group karma and so forth, it does seem that there is a karma to the individual, and then there's family karma, there's community karma, there's national karma, and there's global karma. And interestingly enough, in the Kali Yuga, it's all precipitating fast. And it's a very exciting time to be alive.
Mm-hmm.
It's, and some people, for courageous souls, it's a priceless time to be. You got a front row ticket to lots of action, and if you can take it. Now, with reference to if you can take it, Judy, you said something really stunning to me, very radical, where you said at the very beginning, and if I got it wrong, then tell me I got it wrong. But you said, okay, you start off with saying like, you know how they say that you can't really change human nature. And then you said, well, Theosophy says actually otherwise. You can change human nature. That's the whole thing of Theosophy. You can change. That is so astonishing. But then you gave it a caveat and you said, but you got to put in the work. Could you go into that?
Well, exactly. We're trying to alter the Atma, the Buddhi manas of the race. I mean, when we join Theosophy, we all get a letter about this, that's what we try to do, not side issues. We're not joining Theosophy to participate in a political group or something of that sort, or a social movement. Many of us may be a part of that. But it's very important that we realize that our human nature, which may seem so evil to the misanthrope and impossible to change to someone who is of that nature, really can be changed. People can change, like Harold Chessman. I mean, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, even he who is the greatest of all sinners will surely come unto me if he has judged aright. I'm just paraphrasing that, but that's near the end of the Gita. That we can all make it, even if we have committed crimes that have put us in jail or whatever. It's like Father Boyle's faith in these young people who had committed crimes, been in jail, that he tried to help. And one of the things he does is to try to get jobs for young people who have committed crimes, and girls who've had babies and have no way to take care of them. He's tried to provide for them. There are nuns who provide for them. So I'm sure Shobda has something more to say about this.
Oh, I don't know, Judy, if I have anything to add to that, but I was really intrigued. First of all, I want to say I just loved the fact how you blended the whole concept of transformation and karma and talked about it so beautifully and eloquently. I think something that Jonathan's question triggered, which is already going on in my mind, was this whole thing about how we look at karma. And I think that's very interesting because there can be a selfish way of looking at it and saying, let me try to counteract what I did by doing this so that I don't have this karma. But I think the Pythagoras way of self-examination, where you really sit and genuinely think about what could I have done that wouldn't have hurt my fellow man and woman? What did I do today that I could have changed? There is that genuine thirst to think about what can I do. And I always think of something H.P. Blavatsky says, that the potential that man has to do great things is always there. That hope, we see a lot of horrible things going around, so that just kind of brings us down. But if that potential that is there, I mean, it's a potential, it has to be activated, right? So I just keep thinking, you look at models around you, people who are doing some amazing stuff, and we don't even know about them till we hear about it somewhere. There is this woman called Miss Rachel, who started out in Maine, and she worked with Sudanese children years ago, and now she's focusing on the children in Palestine and talking about what is happening to them. And it's remarkable how she talks about the fact that we are all one. My child and your child is the same. That's the way she's looking at it. And she is incredibly popular. And what I've heard is that the children who are growing up in the rubble in Palestine are watching her and getting some joy out of listening to what she has to say, because she's genuinely trying to do something, because she cares about every child there. I'm giving that example to say how much potential each one of us has to kind of work on collective karma, personal karma, family karma.
Well, yes, I couldn't put it better than that, Shobda. If people would realize their own potential. I mean, in St. Vincent Millay, who's a great poet, and I like her because she says exactly what she means. She says, "We never know how high we are till we are called to rise."
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the heroism we recite would be a daily thing, did not ourselves the cubits warp for fear to be a king. I always liked that little poem of hers because she's saying, realize the potential in yourself. But if you live in a society that teaches you that you're some sort of hopeless, sinful creature, or that you have parents or teachers who don't encourage you for some reason and put you down, then of course that can be very hard to overcome. But it can be overcome. And of course, there are people who have overcome addiction, they've overcome all sorts of terrible karmas. And then there are those who have failed as well. But, we just have to keep working on ourselves. And once we get to the point where we can help others, then of course that is our dharma, and a very good one to be able to do that.
Jonathan?
Judy, you said something else with reference to chemistry and that it's very occult. And I'm thinking about two words, karma and transformation, and karma and transmutation. And I'm thinking transformation might be like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, maybe. Just one example amongst many. But transmutation seems almost like lead turning into gold or something. And when you said about the chemistry, and I think you even mentioned alchemy, I was wondering if you could talk about maybe, I guess, the difference between transformation and transmutation. Maybe they're the same thing. I don't even know. What do you think?
Well, I think to transform is to take on another form. To transmute would seem to have, a mutation of the material inside you. It's said that a person who is a vegetarian in some ways refines their vehicle to become more porous to spiritual ideas. Not that it's absolutely necessary to be vegetarian. Some of us can't because we've had the karma to have bodies that require some meat. But I think there is a subtle difference. But I mean, we're all trying to transmute and transform ourselves. And of course, the alchemists, it said that that's a person who could turn base metal into gold. Of course, that is really a metaphor for the changing of the human being from being a very base, mediocre person into a golden individual with a golden aura. And of course, that takes a long time. But apparently, there are alchemists, such as Cagliostro, HPB talks about, who's very much maligned. He was a very serious Mason during the time of the French Revolution. And apparently, he was capable of transmuting elements and doing other things, seemingly miraculously. So was HPB, but she quit doing it because people accused her of being a phony. Same thing with Cagliostro, a very misunderstood individual. So I don't know much about alchemy or chemistry, but I did read that.
Thank you.
Well, I wonder how much that has to do also with the habits that we form, because everything in nature operates off of memory. And sometimes that memory, for instance, in an atom, is done unconsciously, but we also operate off of memory. And I think that has a lot to do with what our nature is performing. It's performing something it's done over and over and over again. And that's a very tamasic energy, which is inertia. We keep doing something over and over again, it strengthens. But the nice thing about it is, even though we might have strengthened bad tendencies or negative tendencies, the fact that we can have tendencies and create tendencies or habits or memory, we can actually create new natures in ourselves too. Is that something that you kind of were alluding to as well? The changing of the ability to change natures is oftentimes about that tamasic ability to create new memory and strengthen it.
Well, yes. I mean, you can even change the habit of the organism instead of just sitting around all day and watching television. You can change the habit of that organism to go to a place and meditate or study or do something active, like exercise, something good for the body or good for other human beings, volunteer, get a homeless shelter or something. I mean, there are habits that can be changed. I was talking to a young man yesterday who had been through Alcoholics Anonymous, and he's been sober for 3 years. And I think that organization's had the power to help a lot of people because, the person has to humble themselves enough to realize that they're powerless before alcohol, and they have to seek a power higher than themselves, whether it's a church or whatever, whether it's theosophy or it can be anything, but at least they have to change their habits before they can really change and then promise that they'll never touch alcohol again because they can't have just a little and stop. So, this young man has transformed his life by going to Alcoholics Anonymous and, getting involved in wholesome activities. And there are people who realize also that they're high functioning alcoholics. I mean, doctors, veterinarians, people who have very difficult jobs, and nevertheless they're drinking scotch all day long, and that kind of thing. Well, that can be stopped. And there is a doctor who wrote his autobiography. It's in his waiting room, who was once an alcoholic, and then he changed and became an athlete and began riding horses and running and doing a lot of things. And he became a very successful physician. He's retired now. but he totally changed his life habits, and it really worked. So not everyone is strong as he is, or as lucky, but it worked out for him.
Well, just as you said, you have to put the work in.
Yes, the AA people, and I think maybe the adepts might be behind that. There's something very powerful about that organization of people helping each other. And there are a lot of movies about it, of course, like I'll Cry Tomorrow with Susan Hayward. It's brilliant about the life of Lillian Gish, who was finally helped in AA after having been a very successful vocalist and performer. She became a hopeless alcoholic, and then she finally had the courage to go up the steps to the AA meeting and get in front of everybody and say she was an alcoholic. And of course, they all say, "Hi, we are too." You know, they're all very friendly. It worked out for her.
Hi, David.
Hi, thanks. This is a little change from that, although it relates to it. I wanted to the question about our individual actions and then group karma, how we affect everything. I wanted to share this great quote of HPB's from the Key to Theosophy, if I might, because it really hits the mark. She says, "It is an occult law, moreover, that no man can rise superior to his individual failings without lifting, be it ever so little, the whole body of which he is an integral part. In the same way, no one can sin nor suffer the effects of sin alone. In reality, there is no such thing as separateness, and the nearest approach to that selfish state which the laws of life permit is in the intent or motive." So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, David.
Perfect topic.
Sean. Sean, are you there? Okay, maybe you stepped away. I did want to.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Sorry.
No worries.
Judy, speechless. Came to mind, and it was something that I've been pondering for the last month, and it was on karma, and it was something that Judge wrote in the notes of the Gita, and I wrote it in his interpretation of the Gita, the black one, and I wrote it right after his antecedent words. And the quote was, "The Gita teaches that the causes of misery do not lie in our conditions or circumstances, but mistaken ideas and actions of man himself, us, karma." And I was entertaining the idea last night and the night before and contemplating it, is where do you start in that change without being attached to the change itself?
Well, I guess you have to understand the virtue of viraga.
Thank you.
That's what I would understand it as. The fourth precept, simply trying to do your duty, follow the path, follow the precepts, and not be too involved in, as you said, the change itself. And I think that's difficult, but it can be done. So, good question.
I'm going to take this opportunity. I had one observation because you mentioned if you could only go back and change our actions. And it made me wonder, maybe we are changing our past actions. Because think about it, maybe there really isn't such a construct as time. Maybe it's just our way of experiencing the movement of change that dictates the way we conceive of time. But maybe there really isn't such a thing as time as we experience it. Maybe it's all happening at once.
Well, this may be true. I've thought about this, and I don't understand that aphorism of Judge. I can't imagine being me going back to the same situation and correcting the mistake I made. But I can imagine maybe in the next lifetime, when confronted with the same situation, that I will do better, that I won't hurt anyone else or cause any problems. That's, learning from one life to the next. But it's true that it said adepts have power over time and space that we don't. So we don't fully understand till we get to that Turiya state. And I don't think any of us are quite there yet, but we will be.
Laura?
Just to add to that, it is said that when the lesson is learned, the condition ceases, right? Once you've learned that lesson, that karma ceases. You might experience it, as you mentioned, Judy, but you will pass through it with flying colors because you have already learned from it, and so you won't repeat the error.
Well, that's right. Hopefully, we learn from our mistakes. The biggest mistake is, of course, not to learn from it or realize it was a mistake.
Well, it might feel like we're just getting started. Desiree, do you have any last summing up comments, or Judy?
Well, I personally just want to thank Judy because it's always such a pleasure to have you, provide a presentation for us, and it's always just chock full of information and insight. So thank you so much, and I also want to thank Ken Small for his reading earlier, and of course Jonathan, our true MC over here. And to everyone else, because it was a wonderful discussion for everyone. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy, and thank you, Desiree, for your
Thank
probing,
you.
wonderful emceeing, as you called it. I just wanted to mention that the Gita was just now mentioned, and the next week we will hear a presentation on yoga and will. I just wanted to read the Hermes quote for that, which has to do with, I think, with karma becoming dharma. It says, to become a true votary of Buddha Yoga through the performance of Svadharma is to become ready to serve the divine will of the Atman.
Beautiful.
So, well, thank you, Desiree and Judy, so much, and
Thank
everybody. So,
Okay. Well, thanks, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Night, everyone.
Right.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Judy.
thank you all for your wonderful questions.
Okay.
Bye.
I tried it. Good night.
Oh, it's in there.